God helps those who help themselves. Has anyone ever heard this said to you? Perhaps even in the last few days. How about one of these zingers? The early bird catches the worm. The only place where success comes before work is in the dictionary. No matter how hard you work, someone else is working harder. The more you sweat, the luckier you get. Much effort, much prosperity. For many of us, Boxer's famous line in the novel Animal Farm is the mantra we live by. I must work hard. We wake up too early, go to bed too late, labor too hard, and worry even harder. We do these things because we believe they'll make us safer, smarter, stronger, and more successful. Some of us even believe that God desires our tireless toil, sweat, and tears. We mistake our culture's workaholism for Christian virtue. We assume that everything depends on us. What a startling departure this is from the way of life our lectionary offers this week. Consider the ancient but wholly relevant opening of Psalm 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord guards the city, the guard keeps watch in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives sleep to his beloved. I hope you'll read these lines over and over again this week and find comfort in each one. But I also hope that we'll receive these words as prophetic, as cautionary, as corrective. Because what the psalmist is doing here is provoking us with a kind of wisdom we're not likely to hear in our boardrooms or our classrooms. He's not simply offering consolation. He's pressing hard against the norms of our pick yourselves up by your bootstraps culture. He's asking us to reimagine our relationship to work, productivity, accomplishment, and success. Psalm 127 takes us back to a foundational truth we ignore at our peril. The work is God's. The work is always God's. It is not ours. This is true regardless of our vocational particulars. God is the builder, the watchman, the healer, the artist, the teacher, the nurturer, the explorer, the cleaner. By this, I mean God is just as invested, involved, and sovereign in our work lives as God is at the altar or in the pews. This means that our anxious toil is neither necessary nor virtuous. It's harmful and idolatrous. As shocking as this might sound, our God doesn't help those who help themselves. God helps the helpless. God helps those who cannot build, guard, rise, rest, prosper, produce, multiply, or thrive without God's merciful and generous assistance. You might be thinking, okay, sure, God is in charge, that's nice. But what does it mean? What does it mean in real life? I still have deadlines to meet, a boss to impress, a society to save. I still have exams to take and a future to plan. I still have sermons to write and stewardship campaigns to run. I still have a family to feed and a retirement to secure. Of course, I rise up early and go late to rest. What else can I do? Perhaps what we can do is reimagine our relationship to work through worship that is formational and transformative. Psalm 127 is one of the Psalms of Ascent that were sung by the Israelites as they journeyed to Jerusalem for their annual festivals of sacrifice, worship, and thanksgiving. As the Jewish pilgrims made their way into the holy city and prepared to enter the temple, they immersed themselves in the story of their covenantal relationship with God. They allowed their liturgies to reshape and remake them. They sang of God's salvation. In my distress, I called to the Lord and he answered me. They sang of divine protection. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. They sang of God's provision. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. They sang of God's protection. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people from this time forth and forevermore. And, as we've already noted, they sang of God's sovereignty over every detail of life. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it in labor build it in vain. In other words, in and through their acts of worship, these ancient pilgrims reminded themselves of who they really are. The children of God, sustained, nourished, protected, blessed, loved, guided, and held in God's world, God's story, God's work, God's salvation. Whatever disordered and competing stories or identities they might have latched onto in the grind of daily life, they shed on the road to Jerusalem. Through their worship, they reoriented themselves. They remembered that their homes, their cities, their families, and their vocations belong to God. They reassumed their proper place in the sacred story, recalling that God is in charge. God is the one who builds and watches. Their role is simply to participate in the work God graciously chooses to share with them. In contrast, I wonder if we routinely eat the bread of anxious toil because we neglect to immerse ourselves in the fullness of God's story and as our spiritual ancestors did. I wonder if we compartmentalize our lives to our spiritual and physical detriment, separating our work from our worship, our weekdays from our Sundays, our offices from our sanctuaries. I wonder if we forget to begin our work with the humble recognition that God is already present and active in the vocations we mistakenly assume are our own. What would it be like to build and watch under the guidance and sovereignty of God? In the particulars of your work life, with all of its unique stresses and responsibilities, what would it be like to acknowledge God as the master builder and yield your skills, your time, and your labor to God's care? What would it be like to see your work as an extension of your worship and your workplace as a place of divine encounter? When the day is done, but your work is not, what would it be like to surrender to the one who longs to give you rest? Most of us know what it's like to experience work as drudgery. We know the malaise and frustration that can overtake us when we lose a sense of purpose in our daily and weekly responsibilities. Our work becomes vain and futile, a grim and joyless duty that has nothing to do with our deepest dreams, hopes, and desires. I think what Psalm 127 offers us is the possibility of divine pleasure, purpose, and joy in our labor. This is not to say that our work is always glamorous, easy, or immediately rewarding. But it is to say that when we work, God is present and God's joy is available. We are not alone. We don't work alone. We are accompanied by the one whose investment in the work is far, far greater than our own. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives sleep to his beloved. In addition to being pure poetry, this is a truth that runs counter to just about everything our culture tells us about our work. What a radical idea, that our worth as human beings doesn't rest in our frenzied productivity, but in God's deep longing to grant us rest. Psalm 127 asks us a question to ponder for a lifetime. What are we building? And why are we building it? Whose work are we engaged in? And to what end? May our answers to these questions be steeped in the sacred story of the God who alone can give our work true value and meaning. In everything we do, in our work and in our rest, may we find our way to the one whose yoke is easy and whose burden is light. Amen. We have a few announcements today. There is a nice coffee hour after the service, so please join us for some food and fellowship. We had convention this weekend. You're going to give a small report on that?
Yes. The main order of business and discussion at convention this year, if you're not aware, is that our Diocese of Indianapolis and the Diocese of Northern Indiana, which is basically Lafayette North, are considering and discerning merging to become one diocese again. That was the case before 1899. So for more information on that, you can go to the website episcopalindiana.org. And yes, and they said it a lot. You can go to episcopalindiana.org, and there's resources there and who you can reach out to if you have more questions. Other than that, we just voted on who was going to be in various offices. Most of them weren't really a vote because only one person ran for an office. If you'd like an update on the budget for the diocese, that can be found on our Episcopal indiedio.com website. Yeah. So that was about it. We had some very nice workshops and dinner on Friday night. That was the fun part.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. On the reunification topic, I will be hosting a Q&A to the best of my ability with the materials that they have provided us so that we can determine where we are as a congregation and that I can reflect that information and any questions we might have back to that committee. It is coming to a close. They're hoping to have a final vote one way or the other by October of 2025. So we're getting closer to that, so I'd like to be able to give you guys the best opportunity to have your voices heard as well. So I have to look at those materials and get that on the schedule. It will not be in the month of December or November because we have our stewardship campaign going on right now, the My Why. In just a few minutes, you will hear from how many? 2 people on their My Whys. November 24th, we have a Thanksgiving pitch-in. That will kind of be the culmination of our stewardship campaign as well as just celebrating Thanksgiving. December 1st, we have a tour of the historic downtown churches that we're a part of. December 7th, we have the Bedford Christmas Parade where we hand out snacks and drinks, hot cocoa in particular. And then Advent soups and suppers are coming back. They're going to be on Wednesdays, December 4th, 11th, and 18th. And they're going to be studying the Living Compass series. Also, today is the second Sunday, so any donations to Life Pantry can go into the red wagon. Those will be delivered this week. Any other announcements before the My Whys? Okay. Any just kidding.
You want to sign up to sponsor a point setup for Christmas decoration, bringing in the church. Sign up sheet is in the parish hall.
Yes. And then we'll do birthdays and anniversaries before we do My Whys. Any birthdays or anniversaries? Awesome. Okay. I'm going to leave it up to you guys.
Okay. Done.
Good morning.
First thing I'd like to do is say, go IU. We have been 10-0 in my lifetime. When you get a chance to flaunt it, you want to take it. I guess I should begin by giving you a little history of my time at St. John's. I was baptized here. In 1958, I was married here. A few years after that, I was offered and accepted a job in the Evansville area and moved down there and was there for 30 years. Attended St. Paul's down there. If you've ever been to the Evansville area, you'll by there on First and Chestnut. It's a beautiful limestone church. Came back up here to be closer to the family I had left. There's a lot of reasons why I come to St. John's. I know when somebody walks into those doors, doesn't matter who they are or what they look like, they're welcome to come to this church and they're loved. I don't know how you could be more godly than that. I know that God's everywhere, so you can pray anywhere. But there's a reverence that I feel when I come into this sanctuary that I don't experience anyplace else. It's a wonderful, warm feeling. And I know that God's there listening to me and helping me. So I would encourage any of you that have friends that may not have a church, or I've got good friends that they're good people, they're good Christian people, but they don't go to church. They listen to a Sunday service on their television. I've recently taken a copy of the bulletin and showed it to them, and there's some good brochures back there in the parish hall, excuse me, about the church. And so if you have any friends like that that are looking, please take the opportunity to give them that information. I know the first time I attended St. John's, I was a little intimidated. It was a different service than I had ever attended before. And if you don't know a little bit about it before you come in, you are intimidated. But the more you know about it, and that's the wonderful thing about the Episcopal Church, because you are a part of the service. There's responses and things. So that a long time ago, and I don't remember when it was, but I heard a guy give a speech, and I copied it down, and every once in a while I read it myself, and I'm going to share it with you. He said, as long as there is one voice left to say welcome to a stranger on hand, to a stranger, one hand outstretched to say enter and share, and one mind remaining to think a thought of warmth and friendship, there is still a hope for humanity. So, God bless us all.
I came here in 1990. I had moved from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, a southern college town where I had grown up. And all of a sudden I'm speaking southern. Anyway, my parents were still there. My friends from high school were still there. I had my children there. And then we decided, my husband and I decided, his parents were dairy farmers in Orleans and they needed help. So we decided that we would move here. I ended up in Orleans, Indiana, and Orleans, Indiana and Chapel Hill, North Carolina could not be more different. One was a southern college town, and Orleans is a one-stoplight, rural farming town. Needless to say, it was total culture shock. I was a duck out of water. I had 3 little kids. My husband's farming venture with his parents did not work out. The only job he could get was to go with Reynolds Incorporated and work out of town. So I'm in a new environment. I'm raising 3 small children by myself, and he's out of town all week. I was not a very happy camper. And I was desperate to find something that I could latch onto that would be familiar. So I looked for an Episcopal church. I had reconnected with my Episcopal church that I had grown up with right before we moved and had been reconfirmed. And luckily I found that there was one in Bedford within driving distance. Now, back in 1990-91, the drive from Orleans was a good 45 minutes because 37 was not a 4-lane. It was not even a Super 2. It was a country road. But I tried to make it about every other week. And I was fortunate to find out that they had an 8 o'clock traditional service, the old service, the Right One service, which I had grown up with, and I thought, well, that's perfect. Dale could bond with the kids, all 3 of them, whether he liked it or not. And I would come and just have just an hour to myself, being somewhere that was familiar. And I think that's the thing about the Episcopal Church, is the familiar, anywhere you go. But especially when I came here, like Don said, it was so warm and it was so inviting. And the first person I met at the 8 o'clock service just happened to be the best friend of my husband's aunt who had passed away. And she sat right in front of me. And when Father Ron introduced me to the congregation, the very small 8 o'clock congregation, she turned around and she just gave me the warmest hug. And I knew that I was in the right place, and I knew that I was home, away from home. The second person I met in this church was Carol Johnson. We were in line getting pictures taken, and she had an infant, only one. And I had 3 little children and 1 infant. And it turned out, we were talking, because we were in line together, and we were talking, and it turned out that her oldest daughter, Hannah, was a month younger than my youngest son, Nick. So we bonded right then and there. With the years, as my kids grew up, and my kids came to church and Christmas services, we met Christina and her mom Jody, and of course Mike Short and his mom Ida, and Bonnie. And it was just family. My kids loved coming to Easter breakfast, and they loved coming to the Christmas Eve service. When Nick was little, there was a total stranger, an older man, sitting behind us. And at the end of the service, he said, he said, I'm so glad I came tonight. He said, because watching your 3-year-old fall asleep during the service was the best part. And Nick was just calmed down. He said, can I help you carry him to the car? There's a family feel here. And like somebody said earlier, when you're growing up and you've got kids and you've got school and you've got scouts, you come to church and it's always, what can I get out of church? What can it do for me? As time has gone on and my kids have grown up, they've gone to college, Nick and Hannah ended up going to the same college for their first year. They get confirmed, they get married, they've started having children of their own. Now the shift, that it's changed, and it's come around full circle to what I can give back to this church. I'm retired, my kids have their own lives, and it's time for me to give back to the church that gave me so much. You have given me so much care and concern with my daughter Brittany, and I will be forever grateful. And I love this place with all my heart, and I'm really, really grateful and so appreciative of everything that I've gotten here for 34 years. Thank you.